Hello there. It has been my intention to be doing more videos on this channel, and I wish that this one was going to be made in happier circumstances and about almost literally any other topic, but this is something I absolutely need to talk about. I need to talk about the BBC, specifically its news arm, and an individual named Lily Cade. So, there is a lot to cover here, and I'm going to do so as succinctly as I can without skimping out on key details. I want to frame this and provide you with as much information as I feel is valid to the main points that I want to focus on, but this will not be comprehensive. And, as I said, there's a lot to go through. So let's start with where all this began. A week ago, on its website, the BBC published an article in which they interviewed a number of lesbian women who made claims of feeling pressured to have intimate relations with trans women and their discomfort with that. Various people who were talked to put it in various ways, some a bit harsher than others. There were no trans women to offer any countervailing view. It's not a matter of doing a he said, she said on specific instances, but this was an incredibly one-sided article, and it fit into the favoring of BBC news related to trans women, highlighting or nudging or otherwise suggesting the idea that trans women are a danger to cis women, in particular lesbians, which is a big key element of the narrative of TERFs, that, if you don't know the term, is trans exclusionary radical feminists, and a substantive part of their assault on trans women is the contention that trans women are predatory men who seek to abuse, coerce, or otherwise harm women, and specifically lesbians. And the BBC has platformed this idea to varying degrees for some time, and they've received criticism about that which they don't address. Now, I want to spend as little time as I can possibly get away with talking about the original article, because I really need to focus on what's gone on since then, and if you want a bit of a more thorough dissection of all the problems with that article and the initial petition that was put together to try and demand that the BBC either take the article down, amend the article, or in some way address the problems and inaccuracies and harmfulness in which it was presented, I would recommend looking up Lily Cade, who both on TikTok and on Twitter has been documenting this entire thing from the beginning. And we are only at the beginning, because at time of recording, I believe it was 2 days ago, one of the women interviewed in that article has had some very nasty things come out. I was going to say about her, yes, about her, but also from her, directly. So, if you didn't take note of the visual warning I put earlier, please be aware that as I get further into this, I am going to be quoting some incredibly transphobic statements made by this individual. And if you are not comfortable listening to that, this is your content warning. So, we now need to talk about Lily Cade. Lily Cade is a pornographic actress, a lesbian pornographic actress. And I really should stress at this point, the fact that she works in pornographic films, that really has no impact on her credibility, and I do not wish to shame her. Honestly, if I felt I could get away with it, I would not bring that up at all, except there's some things we're going to deal with later where you kind of need to know the context. But just know that everything I'm about to say to her has nothing to do with the fact that she works in the adult industry. If I had the ability to snap my fingers and destigmatize things, the first thing would be being trans. The second thing would be sex work. If you're curious, the third thing is kind of a tie between neurodivergence and physical disabilities, but we'll move on from that. So the first issue at hand with Lily Cade is that she is a known abuser and predator of women. I am going to back up this statement because accusations without evidence are a very, very damning thing and something that is slung at trans women very, very frequently. So, dating back to 2017, there were at least 3 other people, women, who worked in the adult industry and had been around or worked with Lily Cade, who cited her as having abused, coerced, or otherwise mistreated them in a sexual manner. And here's a really important thing. Lily Cade herself did not really deny this. In fact, she issued an apology, which I'm not going to read in total because it's long and I don't want to get overly bogged down in this. I will, however, link to an article that has her full statement down in the description if you do wish to read it. But the TLDR on it is that it frames her behavior, honestly, in a way very reminiscent of what we hear when a lot of male toxicity is brought up. This idea of, I thought everyone was into it, I thought I was just playing to expectations, I thought everyone was okay. Just painting a picture where she believed her behavior was appropriate, but by apologizing, acknowledging that it in fact was not. Now this in and of itself is already highly damning to the tone and lean of that original article. Because if you are writing a piece framing trans women as a danger to lesbians, and one of the people you talk to back up that assertion is a woman, a cis woman, a lesbian, who has a documented history of sexual abuse of other women, that immediately belies your entire point because it makes the point, well, anybody can be an abuser. It is not an inherent thing to a certain type of person. So, this was not in any way noted by the BBC. I should mention at this point that through the initial complaints, issues, notes of problems, and that petition that I mentioned, the BBC has basically stuck by their reporting and claimed they go through a rigorous journalistic process, and they stood by the article in its entirety. If this seems bad so far, you're gonna need to brace yourself, because we're getting to the worst of it. At time of recording, between 2 days and about a day and a half ago, Lily Cade put out what I can only call a manifesto outlining her full, unvarnished feelings on trans women. It has been since taken down, however, it was thoroughly archived and confirmed to have been put up by her, and that was done in fairly short order. I am most certainly not going to read the entire thing, however, I am going to read some key excerpts. Cancel the ever-living out of this. Cancel this so hard that no man dare walk the path of the trans woman in public ever again. Enough is enough. Lynch Caitlyn Jenner. Lynch the sisters Wachowski. Lynch Laurel Hubbard. Lynch Fallon Fox. If you left it up to me, I'd execute every last one of them personally. Now, part of the reason I did not want to spend too much time on the original BBC article is because to fully dissect and explain why that framing and the way that article was put together was so harmful takes time, because you have to get into all the meta issues of the BBC's history up to now, the idea of general journalistic framing, the idea of how well vetted the people being interviewed are. There's a lot of nuance to it. There is no nuance to this. There is no way to defend these statements at all. It is normally hyperbolic to say that somebody is inciting or calling for violence against a group of people. But there is no other way to read this. She named specific trans women that she wanted lynched. She said that trans women should be killed. She expressed a desire to be the one to do it personally. This is undeniable transphobia, because so much of the conversation about transphobic content these days, whether it be the BBC article, whether it be J.K. Rowling, whether it be Dave Chappelle, all of it tends to get bogged down in a conversation of, okay, exactly how is that transphobic? Because some people in good faith will not fully understand where the problems in the content lies, and some people in bad faith will hijack that and just hang up the debate on whether or not it's transphobic at all, so that we don't actually have to address the fact that it is. But again, there is no alternate interpretation of this. This is a call for the death of trans women. And until, at time of recording, about 15 minutes ago, the BBC had not only made no comment, they had not altered the original article. Now, at time of recording, a very short while ago, they did alter it in the literal, minimal way they could get away with. What they did was remove the portions where they spoke with Lily Cade specifically and added a footnote at the bottom of the article, which I'm now going to read to you. We have updated this article published last week to remove a contribution from one individual in light of comments she had published on blog posts in recent days, which we were able to verify. We acknowledge that inappropriate behavior by the same contributor should have been included in the original article. This is, I was going to say literally the bare minimum. It's actually less given the delay. Because when you write an article featuring someone who then goes forth to call for the death of people and expresses a personal desire to be the mechanism by which that death happens, why would it take over 24 hours, more than a full business day, for you to, if not take the article down completely, remove her parts of it? Why would you wait to distance? What argument, what debate is there to be had about whether or not those segments should be removed? At the very least, in regards to the fact that her being an abuser undermines the point that your article appears to be making in the first place. That alone should have gotten her contributions removed. But this? There is no excuse for leaving it up and unaddressed as long as they did. And there's an interesting thing about this statement. It contains as few details as is humanly possible. It does not name the contributor, because they sure as hell don't want people looking up who it was and realizing how badly they screwed up. And it's interesting that they say inappropriate behavior and then don't cite what that is or explain why it should have been noted. It's quite a happy coincidence that since they removed her portions from the article, they actually no longer have to put in the acknowledgement that should have been there if you were going to quote her. There is some debate to be had about where exactly the problem lies in the fact that she was in this article in the first place. Because as I said, even before she said any of this, her past as an abuser should have disqualified her from being interviewed in an article of this sort if you have any journalistic integrity. So there is one of two options. Either they did not properly vet her, and it does not take a lot of searching to find out about her history within the industry that the article knows she comes from because it did cite her work background, or they knew and they didn't care, and they thought it was okay to quote her anyways. Either one is an insanely shoddy piece of journalism. It's just a question of whether it is incompetence or malicious intent. Because the first option is that they just did a bad job. Which, yeah, that's the most generous option. That some buddies, either the writer, the editor, both, multiple people, I don't know, was flat out incompetent in doing their due diligence. Or they didn't care that it undermined their point. They would rather have her quotes in there regardless. Now, there's also been some stuff that's come out since, such as a trans performer who says that she did get in contact with the BBC to try and warn them about the fact that Lily Cade had this history and she claims she was ignored. I don't want to dwell too much on that because at time of recording, I don't know if it's been fully verified, this story that she's giving. I don't have a reason to disbelieve her, but everything else that I'm talking about so far is verifiable, whereas that particular piece is, at least at the time I'm recording this, one person's word. In addition, I also want to read something else to you. So, as I said, there was a petition, and many people, either trans people or trans allies, emailed the BBC registering complaints about that article. And I am going to cite some details from one individual who did so, and the response they got back. This originates from Twitter from Krista Peterson. In her formal complaint to the BBC, which was done prior to Lily Cade's manifesto coming out, so far as I'm aware, she not only laid out the issues with Lily Cade and presenting comments from her on issues of abuse by not only quoting the 3 women who have accused Lily Cade of abuse, but linking directly to Twitter accusations and a still up tweet, as well as linking to Lily Cade's own apology and admission that things were not okay and she had done bad things. And I'm going to focus on the highlighted portion. In the context of the article, Lily Cade is referred to due to her decision to back out of filming a porn scene after discovering online that Drew DeVoe was a trans woman. This in no way, shape, or form addressed the concerns. It simply says why she was cited in the article, but anyone who read the article knows why she was cited, because she wished to speak of an incident that fit the narrative that the article had. This is ignoring flatly everything that was wrong even before this woman called for people's deaths. And to the best of my ability, so far as I can find, not only has the BBC issued no proper statement about this, I actually can find very little from the major British news outlets at all. Everybody seems to want to pretend this didn't happen, which you might think is understandable. But there's a very big problem with just pretending it didn't happen and then trying to move on. When someone calls for the killing of people, you have to disavow them. Not just distance yourself and your work from them, but actively say, we do not agree. Because if you do not do that, if you do not say, we do not condone these statements or beliefs, that leaves the window open for people to believe that you do support them. And at this point in time, even leaving that possibility is unacceptable. And this is not a situation like Netflix and Dave Chappelle, which is its own screwed up thing, more to do with what's happened since, rather than the special itself. But that was a case where there was a conversation. I mentioned earlier, a debate to be had. Was this transphobic? In what way? Well, let's talk about it. There is no question here. When someone is this unabashedly transphobic, to not say that was wrong is to allow people who are that transphobic and who agree with those comments to look at your response and go, oh, I see you. Does anyone remember Donald Trump and his reluctance to disavow David Duke, former head wizard of the Ku Klux Klan? At the time that happened, that was major news because everyone disavows the Ku Klux Klan. Even politicians whose policies would seem to very much line up with the things that people like members of the Klan would want, they disavow them. But Trump didn't. And when somebody calls for the death of people, an entire group of people, you disavow that. And at this point, to not do so, as far as I'm concerned, is a co-signing of her statements. When someone is talking about killing people, you do not get to sit back and say, well, we do not take a stand. You have to, because people are being threatened with death. You do not get to be neutral on that. And if you do not have it within yourself to say, we condemn these comments, we condemn the call for violence, then that to me says you are okay with it. Because if you do not wish to address it, that means that you don't have a problem with its existence. And I know it's uncomfortable to address. I'm uncomfortable talking about it. I was uncomfortable reading it. I was uncomfortable reading it out loud now. But it is not acceptable to be neutral on something like this. And I'm not saying that the BBC suddenly has to have a pro-trans women agenda. That's not going to fucking happen. However, when people are threatened and someone calls for death and lynching, you do not get to claim neutrality or pretend it didn't happen with someone who you platformed and defended platforming for over a day after she said this. If I did not have a significant part of Council of Geeks, my larger channel, devoted to Doctor Who, and have that be the foundation of what I've built, knowing that a significant part of my livelihood is dependent on covering that, I would honestly stop talking about the new series of Doctor Who. And yes, I understand that the news arm of the BBC and the creative arm of the BBC are not run by the same people. I do not care at this moment in time. I am going to continue to talk about the new episodes of Doctor Who because I have to. I don't mean out of obligation. I mean, I can't take the hit to my finances by not talking about them. However, I am going to put a link pinned in the comments at every single review for the current series of Doctor Who, linking back to this video and stating that the BBC is a transphobic organization until proven otherwise. And again, you don't have to suddenly become world-class allies. I do not expect that. But I expect you to condemn calls for death. And if you are incapable of doing that, I have no choice but to assume you can't condemn it because you agree with it. And it is on you to prove me wrong about that. Because right now, all evidence points to rampant transphobia at the BBC and the news division specifically. This now is on you to prove that that is not who you are. Because if you are going to sit back and act like it isn't happening, that means you are okay with everyone understanding that that is exactly who you are. I spent yesterday so angry I couldn't focus. I got barely any work done. But there was something else that I encountered yesterday that actually perked me up quite a bit. And it's something I'm going to share with you. I am not watching the new series of Chucky, which is a continuation of the Child's Play and Chucky franchise, the one about the killer doll. Now, this new series is in canon with the previous films, well, not counting the reboot from a couple years ago, but it's in canon with the rest of them. And in a recent episode, it made an acknowledgement of what is actually possibly the most maligned entry in the franchise, Seed of Chucky, and a character in that who does display some, let's say, conflicted feelings about their own gender. And in a recent episode of Chucky, a clip which I became aware of thanks to TikTok, this exchange happened.
You know, I have a queer kid.
You have a kid.
Gender fluid.
And you're cool with it.
I'm not a monster, Jake.
The gauntlet has been thrown, BBC. You are officially less accepting and supportive than a serial killer doll powered by voodoo. Ball's in your court. That's all I have to say at this time. I have no doubt this will be a continually evolving story, but unless a major unexpected shift occurs, I don't think I'm going to do further videos on the situation going forward because it is draining for me to do so. But this I had to. this I had to talk about. I'm sorry to burden you with it, because it's a lot, I know. But take care of yourselves, and I need you to remember this. Please, especially if you've gotten to the end of this video. You are beautiful. You are valid. And you are loved. Take care of yourself. Be careful.